Welcome to Life Stories. In a world where money often seems to dictate everything, one man's bet forces him to marry someone far outside his social circle. A woman who doesn't fit his ideal. What begins as a challenge soon leads to an unexpected journey of love, betrayal, and self-discovery. As they navigate through the complexities of their relationship, both Alex and Maria learn that change, trust, and redemption are possible, but only through deep, painful growth. This is a story about transformation, the price of forgiveness, and the power of second chances. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to start today's story on Life Stories. It was one of those nights where the high society glittered under the bright lights, with laughter and clinking glasses echoing throughout the grand Montgomery mansion. The evening was in full swing, as Alex Montgomery, a man whose wealth and arrogance were as evident as his tailored suit, stood surrounded by friends who shared the same inflated egos and insatiable thirst for excess. He stood at the center of attention, a self-assured smile playing on his lips as his guests fawned over his every word, sipping champagne and discussing topics that, to anyone outside their circle, would have seemed trivial at best. But then, as it often happens at these kinds of gatherings, someone decided to test the limits of Alex's confidence. Tyler Kingston, a man known for his sharp tongue and love of provocation, stepped up with a mocking smile, holding a glass of red wine in his hand. With a mischievous glint in his eyes, he turned to Alex and said, "You always say that money can buy anything, Alex. That with the right amount, you can transform anything and anyone into something completely different. But can you prove it? Can you show us that money really is the most powerful force in the world?" The words hung in the air, and a sudden silence fell over the group. Alex raised an eyebrow, clearly unfazed, but his interest piqued. "Isn't it obvious, Tyler?" he said with a slight chuckle, his confidence unshaken. "Money has no limits. It's the key to everything: power, influence, respect. With it, you can make anything happen." Tyler stepped closer, his grin widening. "Easy to say when you're surrounded by people who just agree with you. But how about this? I'll bet you $5 million that you can't marry someone outside your social circle. A woman who doesn't meet your so-called standards. Someone ordinary. Someone who doesn't belong in your world. And there's a catch. You have to stay married to her for 3 months. Convince the world that the marriage is real. And, at the end of it all, transform her into someone unrecognizable." The challenge was audacious, and the room shifted with murmurs of surprise. Alex's gaze locked onto Tyler's with a mixture of boredom and disbelief. He was used to being the center of attention. But this was different. A woman outside his world, someone plain, ordinary, unremarkable. The very thought was laughable. "No way," Alex replied, his voice dripping with disbelief. "Me, married to a woman who doesn't fit my standards for 3 months? That's ridiculous. It's not even worth answering." His tone was dismissive, confident in the fact that no one would ever expect him to take such a challenge seriously. But Tyler, with his usual flair for the dramatic, ignored Alex's initial refusal. His eyes scanned the room and then, as if by design, they landed on someone, a maid. Maria, carrying a tray of champagne glasses across the room. Her hair was tied back in a simple bun, her black and white uniform spotless but plain. She was hunched over slightly, her eyes cast down as she carefully did her job, completely unaware of the conversation unfolding around her. "What about her?" Tyler asked, nodding towards Maria with a sly smile. "She's perfect for the challenge. Not your type at all. Is she?" Alex followed Tyler's gaze, his eyes narrowing in distaste as he took in the sight of Maria. A maid. The very idea of marrying someone like her, someone beneath him in every possible way, was utterly absurd. "You can't be serious, Tyler," Alex scoffed. "Me, married to a maid? That's preposterous." Tyler, never one to back down, continued his provocation. "If money really is your greatest tool, Alex, this should be a walk in the park. You're the great Alex Montgomery, aren't you? Or are you afraid you'll lose the bet?" The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone was watching now, captivated by the escalating challenge. Alex, who had built his life on never backing down from a challenge, felt his pride sting. If he refused now, he would be seen as a coward. And that was something he couldn't allow. With a small, cold smile, Alex took a deliberate sip from his wineglass before finally replying. Fine. 3 months. I'll marry her and prove to you that there's no challenge I can't conquer. His words were ice, sharp with resolve, and the room erupted in a mix of laughter and approval. Tyler extended his hand, sealing the deal with a handshake. And Alex accepted it, his mind already beginning to race with the implications of what he had just agreed to. I'll make sure it looks real, Tyler said, his voice dripping with amusement. But remember, Alex, if you fail, I'll be $5 million richer. Alex gave him a dismissive nod. I don't fail, he replied, his tone confident. And you'll be opening your wallet, Tyler. The next morning, as the sun streamed through the windows of the mansion, Maria was in the kitchen, washing dishes, her mind focused on the task at hand. But when she heard footsteps behind her, she turned and saw Alex standing in the doorway. He had his hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on her with a cool, almost calculating expression. Maria, he said, his voice steady but firm. I need to talk to you. It's about a proposal. Maria frowned, confused. A proposal? She had no idea what he was talking about. I want you to marry me, Alex said, stepping closer to her. His words were casual, as though he were discussing a business arrangement, not a life-altering decision. It's a marriage of convenience. You'll be my wife for 3 months. In exchange, I'll pay you a sum that could change your life. The words hung in the air, and Maria felt her breath catch in her throat. This wasn't a joke. He was serious. I don't understand, she stammered, her hands trembling slightly. Alex, however, was unfazed. It's simple, Maria. You're perfect for this. No one would expect me to marry someone like you. That's why it'll work. Maria's mind was spinning. She wanted to say no, to walk away, but the mounting debts and her responsibility for her family kept her rooted in place. The promise of a better life, a way out of her struggles, was too much to ignore. If I agree, what happens after the 3 months? Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We get divorced, Alex replied with cold indifference. No questions, no ties. You go back to your life. And I go back to mine. But you'll be in a much better position than when you started. Maria looked at him, trying to gauge whether this was some cruel joke. But the check he pulled from his pocket told a different story. It was a sum of money that could solve all her financial problems. Her family's struggles could end in an instant. With a deep breath, she finally nodded. I accept. Alex smiled, satisfied. Great. Tomorrow, you'll be my wife. And just like that, her life was about to change forever. The following day, Maria could barely believe how quickly her life had taken such an unexpected turn. She had agreed to marry Alex Montgomery, the wealthy and charismatic millionaire, for a sum of money that could change her future. But as the morning sun filtered through the windows of the grand Montgomery mansion, Maria couldn't shake the heavy feeling in her chest. She was about to marry a man who saw her as nothing more than a pawn in his game. A woman to be used to satisfy his pride and prove a point to his friend. But she had no other choice. She had to take the chance. For her family, for herself, the bills were piling up. And her younger siblings depended on her. If this was the only way out, she would follow through. The mansion was bustling with staff. And Maria, as always, remained in the background, cleaning and organizing. The luxury and opulence around her felt alien, as though she didn't belong. The reality of her situation hit her with every step she took through the marble halls. Every gleaming chandelier that cast long shadows. Alex, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease in this world, as if it was made for him. She was in the side garden, kneeling and gathering leaves from one of the old trees when she heard his voice. Maria, Alex called out, standing just a few feet away, his posture rigid and businesslike. She stood up quickly, brushing her hands on the edge of her apron, feeling a wave of discomfort wash over her. She had been avoiding him all morning, hoping that, just for a moment, she could pretend that the marriage wasn't really happening. Everything's ready, Alex continued, his tone distant. We're going to the registry office in an hour. Maria blinked, confused. Registry office? Already? Alex didn't show any sign of empathy as he answered. Yes. The sooner we get this over with, the better. The documents are ready. You just need to sign them. The formalization of their marriage was happening so quickly, and the reality of it began to feel suffocating. She had thought, maybe, there would be time for her to change her mind, to reconsider. But as Alex stood there, completely calm and detached, she realized that this wasn't a fairy tale, it was a transaction. A business arrangement where emotions were not welcome. She felt powerless. I need more time, Maria said, almost pleading, though she knew deep down that she had already agreed. Alex's gaze hardened, his lips thinning slightly. Time for what? He asked, his voice becoming more impatient. You agreed, Maria. We don't have time to waste. I'm not used to waiting. Maria sighed, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She had promised herself that she would be strong, that she would not let Alex manipulate her. But now, standing in front of him, it felt as though all her strength was slipping away. Her family needed this, and despite the shame she felt, she couldn't back out. All right, she said softly, I'm ready. An hour later, Maria found herself sitting in the back of a sleek black limousine. Her nerves frayed as she stared out the window. The world outside seemed so different from her own, glistening skyscrapers, luxury cars, people who seemed so distant and unapproachable. When they arrived at the registry office, Alex led her inside without any ceremony, as though this was just another business transaction. The room was sterile, cold, and efficient. 2 lawyers stood at attention, and a few staff members shuffled in the background, all with the same cold professionalism that made Maria feel even more out of place. She signed the papers quickly, her hands trembling as she did so. In just a few minutes, her life had changed forever. She was officially Mrs. Montgomery, a name she had never imagined she would bear. Alex shook the registrar's hand, a faint smile on his lips. Congratulations, he said in a flat tone. We're officially married. As they walked back to the car, the silence between them was oppressive. Maria couldn't bring herself to look at Alex. She couldn't decide if she was angry, disappointed, or just numb. When they arrived back at the mansion, she was led up to a room that seemed to belong in a different world, lavish, luxurious, and completely foreign to her. The bed was enormous, the curtains made of velvet, and the closet was larger than the apartment she had lived in just a few months ago. This will be your room, Alex said, his tone impersonal, as though he were giving her a tour of an office space rather than a home. Maria stepped inside, glancing around at the opulence. But it all felt hollow. She tried to suppress the emotions welling up inside her. But it was hard. Nothing about this felt real. It wasn't love. It wasn't even companionship. It was a deal. A deal that Alex had won. And now, as part of it, she had to play the role of a wife she didn't want to be. It's beautiful, she said, her voice distant as she fought back the tears that threatened to fall. Alex's eyes briefly flickered with something, maybe irritation or something else, but he said nothing. He turned to leave, leaving her alone in the room. Alone with her thoughts. Alone with the reality of what she had just agreed to. 3 months. She only had to survive 3 months. And then she could leave this world behind. But as the door clicked shut, Maria realized that she might not leave this world the same person she entered it. And that frightened her more than anything. The days that followed Maria's marriage to Alex were a blur of emotions. Confusion and tension. The mansion, once so foreign to her, had become her new reality. But no matter how much she tried to adjust to the world around her, something always felt off. Alex kept his distance, his attitude cold and businesslike, as if he were treating the arrangement like another one of his high-stakes deals. Maria, on the other hand, struggled to find her place. She was constantly reminded of how different she was from Alex and his world. The opulence, the expectations, and the pretense suffocated her. But amidst the coldness of her new life, there was a quiet strength inside Maria that began to stir. Every time she looked in the mirror, she was reminded of who she truly was, someone who had survived hardship. Someone who had fought to keep her family afloat. She might be in this strange, lavish world. But that didn't change who she was at her core. The wealth around her could never erase her past. Nor would it ever make her forget the things that truly mattered. One afternoon, after yet another impersonal exchange with Alex, Maria found herself in the garden of the mansion, kneeling down to tend to the flowers. It was a rare moment of peace, where the hum of the world seemed far away. The scent of wet grass and blooming flowers filled the air, and for just a moment, she felt a sense of calm, something that had been missing since her life had changed so drastically. But that calm was broken by the sound of footsteps approaching. "Maria," Alex called, his voice carrying through the garden. She stood up quickly, brushing dirt off her hands, though it only smeared onto the apron she wore. Her eyes met Alex's, and for the first time, she noticed a flicker of something different in his gaze. His usual arrogance was absent, replaced by a determined, almost expectant look. "We need to talk," he said, his voice more serious than usual. "About your role here." Maria frowned. "My role?" Alex stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Yes. You're my wife, Maria, and you need to act like it." Maria blinked in surprise. "What do you mean? What am I supposed to do?" "Appearances matter, Maria," Alex said, his voice more forceful now. "You can't keep hiding in the background. You're going to be seen with me at events, at dinners, in public. I need people to believe that this marriage is real, that you fit into my world." Maria's heart sank. She had never wanted any of this. She wasn't interested in the parties, the events, or the glamorous lifestyle that Alex was trying to force on her. But she also knew that this wasn't just about her anymore. She had made a promise to herself, to survive this, to get through the 3 months without losing herself completely. "I won't pretend to be someone I'm not, Alex," Maria said, her voice firm but calm. "I'll do what I have to do, but I won't change who I am." Alex studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "I think that's what makes you different, Maria, and that's why I need you by my side. You're real, in a world of fake smiles and empty conversations. You stand out." Maria didn't know how to respond to that. The words were strange coming from him, especially after everything he had put her through. She had expected him to push back, to demand more of her. But instead, there was a flicker of respect in his eyes. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And for the first time in their brief marriage, she felt a small crack in the wall between them. Over the next few weeks, Maria began to adjust to the life Alex had thrust upon her. She went to events, sat through dinners with his friends, and learned how to navigate the world of high society. She may not have fit in, but she was determined to hold her own. There were moments when Alex looked at her with a mixture of approval and surprise. He had expected her to buckle under the pressure, but Maria's resilience surprised him at every turn. One evening, at a particularly tense dinner party, Alex's friends were relentlessly teasing Maria. The women were overly polite, their smiles razor sharp, their eyes scanning her every movement. They were judging her, measuring her up, as if she were a foreign object in their world. But Maria didn't flinch. She sat with her back straight, her hands folded on her lap, and responded with grace. It wasn't easy, but she didn't let their words get to her. Then, unexpectedly, one of Alex's friends, Thomas, made a cutting remark. "So, Mrs. Montgomery," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "how does it feel to finally be in a place you've never belonged?" Maria's eyes narrowed, but instead of retreating into herself, she met his gaze with a cool smile. "Funny," she replied, her tone equally sharp. "I was just thinking the same thing about you." The table fell silent, and Alex, who had been watching the exchange with mild amusement, raised an eyebrow. For the first time, he saw Maria not as a pawn in his game but as a woman who could stand up for herself. There was strength in her that he hadn't expected, and it unsettled him. As the night went on, Alex couldn't help but feel a growing admiration for her resilience. Despite everything, despite the ridicule, Maria held her own with dignity. And as the evening ended, and they made their way home, Alex's thoughts were far from the usual concerns of business and status. He was starting to see Maria differently. She wasn't just the woman he had married for a bet. She was someone who had fought for everything she had, and maybe, just maybe, she could teach him something about what truly mattered. The tension that had been building between Maria and Alex finally reached its peak one evening when Tyler, ever the instigator, arrived at the mansion unannounced. He barged into the grand hall with his usual arrogance, his eyes scanning the room for Alex. The guests who were still lingering after the latest event took notice, sensing something off about his presence. But Alex, who had been in the middle of a quiet conversation with Maria, stood up immediately, sensing that something was about to unfold. "Alex," Tyler called, his voice as sharp as the smirk on his face. "We need to talk. In private." Maria, who had been sitting at the far end of the room, looked up from the book she had been pretending to read. Her heart sank at the tone in Tyler's voice. She could tell something wasn't right. "Tyler, what are you doing here?" Alex's voice was firm but controlled, masking the slight tension that Maria could see in his posture. Tyler, never one to mince words, didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I think it's time the truth came out. Don't you?" He raised a folder in the air, shaking it slightly. "I have everything, Alex. Proof of the bet you made. Proof of what this marriage was really about." Maria froze. The words didn't make sense at first. The bet? She had known that Alex had been challenged to marry her, but she had never thought that anyone would expose it. Not like this. She looked at Alex, waiting for him to deny it, to make everything right again. But Alex didn't speak, his gaze falling to the floor. The room seemed to close in around Maria. She could feel the eyes of the guests on her, their curiosity mixing with a sense of disbelief. She had been living in this strange, gilded cage for what felt like an eternity. And now it was all falling apart in front of her. She had given everything to this arrangement, holding on to the hope that there might be something real between her and Alex. But now, everything was a lie. Tyler, sensing the weight of the moment, leaned in, his voice dripping with cruelty. "You were never meant to be his wife. Maria, you were just a pawn in his game. A bet, that's all you were to him." The words hit Maria like a slap. She had felt it, deep down. She had always known that Alex hadn't married her out of love. But hearing the truth spoken so plainly shattered her. Her throat tightened as she looked at Alex, waiting for him to speak, to defend her, to say something, anything, to show that he cared. But all he did was stare at Tyler, his expression unreadable. "Alex, is this true?" Maria asked, her voice barely a whisper. Her chest tightened as she waited for him to deny it, to give her a reason to stay, to make sense of the confusion that swirled in her mind. But Alex remained silent, and that silence was louder than any words he could have said. Maria felt as though the ground beneath her was crumbling. She had given up her dignity for this man, thinking that maybe, just maybe, he would change, that there might be something more than just money and power in their relationship. But now she saw the truth. She was nothing more than a bet, a wager for Alex's pride. Without another word, she stood up, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. She couldn't look at him anymore. She couldn't stay in a place where she was nothing but a game. She turned to leave, but Alex's voice stopped her. "Maria, please," Alex said, stepping forward. "Let me explain. It's not what you think." But Maria shook her head, her voice breaking as she spoke. "No, Alex, I can't do this anymore. I can't be part of your game. I'm not some pawn to be used for your amusement." With that, she left the room, her heart heavy with the weight of betrayal. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay in this place any longer. The mansion, once filled with promise, now felt like a prison. She needed to escape, to find a way back to herself. As she left the mansion, she could feel the eyes of the guests on her, their whispers following her, but she didn't care anymore. She had to leave, to reclaim her life. Whatever had happened between her and Alex, whatever feelings had developed, it didn't matter now. The truth had been exposed, and she couldn't unsee it. In the days that followed, Maria moved into a modest boarding house on the outskirts of the city. Far from the opulence of the Montgomery mansion, she took a job at a small cafe, using the money Alex had promised her to start over. It wasn't much, but it was hers. For the first time in a long while, Maria felt a sense of freedom. even though the pain of betrayal still lingered in her heart. As for Alex, he remained in the mansion, haunted by his actions. His life, once filled with luxury and control, now felt hollow without Maria's presence. He couldn't understand why he felt the way he did. He had played the game, and he had won, but what he hadn't counted on was losing something that money could never buy. Maria, meanwhile, continued to rebuild her life, one step at a time. But no matter how far she moved on, the memory of Alex, and the lessons she had learned, stayed with her, a constant reminder of the price of trust, and the cost of love. The weeks that followed Maria's departure from the Montgomery mansion were some of the most difficult of her life. She had left behind not only the grand mansion and the luxury it represented but also the fragile hope that she and Alex could have something real. The truth of the bet had cut deeper than she could have imagined. And as she settled into her new, modest life, she allowed herself time to process what had happened. Working at the small cafe allowed Maria to focus on her own survival, the daily grind giving her little room to dwell on her past. It was a humble life, but one that gave her a sense of independence, something she hadn't felt in a long time. The constant reminder of her siblings, who had always relied on her, kept her grounded. She had promised them that she would make things better, and for the first time, she was beginning to feel that she was holding true to that promise. But even as she kept busy, her thoughts kept drifting back to Alex. The image of him, standing there, silent, as Tyler exposed the truth of their marriage, haunted her. She couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was more to him than the arrogant man who had treated her like a pawn in his bet. It was hard to reconcile that version of Alex with the man she had seen moments of kindness from. Yet, despite everything, part of her still wondered if he could change. If he could truly understand the weight of his actions and learn the lesson she had tried so desperately to teach him. Then, one afternoon, when Maria was wiping down the counter at the cafe, she heard the familiar chime of the doorbell. She didn't think much of it at first. Customers came and went. But then, she froze. She knew that voice, that presence, even before she turned around. "Maria," Alex said, his voice a little hesitant, yet unmistakably familiar. She turned slowly, her heart racing as she looked at him standing there in the doorway. He was dressed simply, not in the sharp suits she had grown accustomed to seeing him in, but in casual clothes. For a moment, he seemed out of place in the small cafe, his usual confidence replaced by something softer, something that made Maria's breath catch. "What are you doing here, Alex?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. She was shocked to see him, and yet, she couldn't deny that a part of her wanted to hear what he had to say. The conversation she had been avoiding, the one she had assumed would never come, was standing right in front of her. "I needed to talk to you," Alex said, his eyes not leaving hers. "I know I've made a mess of things, but I've realized that I can't keep going without acknowledging what I've done. I've been an idiot, Maria, and I've hurt you in ways I can never take back. But I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can change. Not for some bet, not for anyone else, just for you." Maria's heart felt heavy as she processed his words. She wanted to tell him that it was too late, that he had lost her trust forever. But as she looked at him, standing there vulnerable in a way she had never seen before, she could see something different in his eyes. Something real. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Alex," Maria said softly, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay composed. "You broke me, you used me, and that's something I can't just forget." Alex nodded, his face filled with remorse. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just want you to know that I'm not the man I was before. I've been doing everything I can to change. I'm involved in social projects now. Things that matter. I've realized that there's more to life than money, than power. It's people who matter. Maria, you showed me that." Maria stared at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. But all she saw was regret and honesty. She had never imagined that Alex Montgomery, the man who had treated her like a challenge to be conquered, would stand before her now, asking for her forgiveness. "I don't know if I can believe you, Alex," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm willing to listen." Alex's face lit up, his expression softening. "Thank you, Maria, that's all I need. I'm not asking for anything else. I just want you to know that I've changed. And I'll keep showing you that I'm different. Even if it takes time. They stood there in silence for a moment. The weight of their past still hanging in the air between them. But for the first time in a long while, Maria felt a flicker of hope. Maybe it was the hope that people could change. That forgiveness was possible, even if it was hard. Over the next few weeks, Alex proved that he was serious about his transformation. He involved himself deeply in the social projects he had mentioned, using his wealth and influence to support causes that actually made a difference. Maria, though still cautious, watched from a distance, her guarded heart slowly beginning to soften as she saw the changes in him. One afternoon, as Maria walked through the park, she spotted Alex sitting on a bench, talking to a group of children. He was no longer the man who had been obsessed with control. He was engaged, listening to their stories, genuinely interested in their lives. It was in that moment that Maria realized that Alex was trying. He wasn't perfect, no one was, but he was trying. And for the first time since their marriage began, she felt a flicker of something that had been missing in her life. Trust. The path ahead wasn't easy, and Maria knew there were still many questions left unanswered. But for the first time in a long time, she was willing to take a chance. Alex had hurt her deeply, but he was also showing her that change was possible, that even the most broken things could be healed. And that was a lesson worth learning. As they sat down together, Maria looked at him, her heart uncertain but open. You've got a long way to go, Alex, she said with a small smile. But maybe, just maybe, you're on the right path. Alex smiled back, his eyes filled with gratitude. I'll do whatever it takes. Maria, I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. And for the first time, Maria believed him. As the days turned into weeks, Maria and Alex continued their journey, slowly learning to navigate the complex web of emotions that had once torn them apart. There were moments of doubt, of hesitation, but there were also moments of connection, of quiet understanding that neither of them had expected to find. Maria had never believed that forgiveness could be so hard, yet so freeing. Alex, for his part, had never imagined that the road to redemption could be so long, but it was worth every step. One evening, as they walked side by side through the garden of the mansion, now transformed by Alex's newfound commitment to making things right, Maria realized that something profound had shifted between them. The barriers of pride and resentment that had once defined their relationship were beginning to crumble, replaced by a growing respect and, perhaps, something more. Alex stopped for a moment, turning to her with a hesitant smile. Maria, he said softly, I know I've asked a lot of you, and I don't expect everything to be perfect. But I need you to know, this is real. This is us, moving forward, and no matter what happens, I'll never stop proving that I can be the man you deserve. Maria looked into his eyes, her heart still a little guarded but also full of hope. She had learned so much from this experience, from pain, from forgiveness, and from the possibility of growth. Maybe love wasn't about perfection. Maybe it was about the willingness to change, to learn, and to forgive. With a gentle smile, Maria nodded. Let's see where this goes, Alex. Together. And as they walked forward, side by side, they knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but also full of promise, a new beginning, built on lessons learned and the courage to start over. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring life stories.